I had a lot of different cell partners over the 19 years that I was in prison, and they'd committed a wide variety of crimes. And at least one guy I truly believe was innocent of the crime that he was convicted of. Probably the most heinous crime was committed by the kid who I probably felt the most sorry for, because this kid had been abused in ways that I had never imagined. The conversations that we had inside that cell, the stories that he told me, the tears that he shed, absolutely broke my heart. And he had committed the crime of matricide. He had taken his mother's life. And then afterwards, in an effort to hide the body, he had begun to dismember her. And when they did a wellness check because nobody had heard from her, that's how they found him and her basically living in the same house when he was in the slow process of trying to dismember the body and vomiting and not being able to clean up the mess and just this absolute insanity. When you hear about something like that, you immediately think, what a monster. Like, how could somebody possibly do that? Like, who could this person be? But when I talked to him, and especially after the stories that I heard, what I saw was not a monster. What I saw was a horribly abused, maladapted kid who had responded in violence that really had been taught to him by his mother. And again, with those stories of abuse that he had endured at her hands, the things she had said and done to him over those years, I can't imagine how violence wouldn't be the inevitability. I can't imagine how he would have ended up in any situation where he still had to interact with her, where he didn't end up doing something to her because of just the sheer evil that she committed on him. But that's the thing. Even in her case, it's complicated because she wasn't just an evil person. She wasn't just a bad person who had done these abusive things. She was someone who'd been horribly abused herself. She was someone who'd been horribly just like treated, and she had taken on all those qualities because, as I like to say, pain is a communicable disease. And if we experience enough of it, if we have enough of it given to us, unless we process that in a healthy way, unless we find a way to deal with it, we will give that pain to other people. That's what she did. And he didn't hate her. Well, I guess he did. He kind of hated her, but he also loved her. And when we talked about her, you would hear these different voices. You would hear the voice that loved his mother and loved how she tried or loved the good things that she did, but you would also hear the anger and the hatred for the horrible things that she had done, the horrible position she had put him in, the horrible threats she had made, the horrible ways she had manipulated him and belittled him and demeaned him. And so I think about that. Because with this communicable disease of pain, if we don't get to the root of that issue, it will continue to spread. And in prison, I saw him be nothing but kind and loving and supportive and trying to help other people and trying to benefit. But he also, again, had that incredibly abused experience. He was probably borderline or had narcissistic personality disorder or some other personality disorder where he wasn't able to fully get out of himself, and he was trapped in those patterns of trauma. But he would teach other people, he would help other people, because he was a very smart kid. He had a lot of potential, but he also would get to this place of just like utter hopelessness and utter worthlessness. There were times where he sold himself to other people for drugs, because the only way he knew to escape his pain or escape his feelings was to numb it through external substances. And we got him into therapy and we had him doing things, and there were times, remember there was one exercise I took him through, where he could never stop. He described himself as a shark swimming through water where if he stopped, he would die. And so I had him go through this exercise where I said, I want you to stop just for a second. You can hold your breath. Like, you're not going to die. You're not going to starve. You're not going to run out of oxygen in 1 second. So he would hold his breath for a second. I said, all right, now I want you to do it for 5 seconds. And we did this over the course of, I don't know, probably an hour or 2 hours. And he got to the point where he could stop. Like, his mind could stop racing. His insanity could stop for almost a minute. And it was like, okay, cool. Then over the weeks and over the months, all of a sudden he could do it for 10 minutes. He could do it for 15 minutes. And then something happened. I don't know what triggered him or what kind of caused him to regress, but he went from where he could stop and he could be there and be still for 15 minutes to where he couldn't be still at all. And it was really heartbreaking because I saw the potential and the change, but again, the weight of that pain and the weight of that trauma is so heavy that it's not easy to build new patterns. It's not easy to build things to adapt to that level of pain and that level of trauma because it's defined us. If we think about a path that we walk on, and we walk on it long enough, we dig a rut. And we dig a rut in the ground, and to climb out of that hole or to climb out of that rut is a difficult thing when it's the only path we've ever known. And when you're starting, whether it's 18 or 20 or 40 or 50, it's even harder the longer you've been living that rut. And it takes one of those wake-up moments or those wake-up experiences, and those help. But it isn't always enough because it's not just an easy thing of like, oh, I'm going to do things differently. No, it's the reality that you have to change everything and that you're going to have those fallbacks and you're going to have those patterns. And I experienced them myself, and I haven't experienced a fraction of the trauma that he experienced. I had some difficult and traumatic things happen to me in my life, but the things that he went through, again, the tears that I shed hearing about the things that he went through were horrible. And I already heard some of the most horrible stories in prison. The guys who were in foster care with families that had biological kids who would like feed them and treat them well and then absolutely abuse or molest the foster kids. I mean, the horrible things that I heard, I don't even know how to describe. But for this kid to top them all by head and shoulders was a really big wake-up call as to just how much abuse someone can experience and just how much it will shape them and how much it will shape their experience and often just how much it will push them in a direction of violence. Because he didn't get the support that he needed. He didn't get the help. And if he had, things probably would have been a lot different. But again, we don't have that infrastructure. So this kid is basically turned into what everybody will call a monster, and in the way that everybody will find to demonize him and tell him what a horrible person he is and how he's beyond redemption. But the reality is he's a kid who experienced that pain and then passed it on. And until we address that in the kids who are experiencing it, until we create an infrastructure to support kids and give them opportunities and give them therapy and remove them from incredibly abusive homes, but not only remove them, actually put them in a place that is safer, not an abusive foster care, not an abusive group home that's just as bad or worse than the home they came from, but actually put them in a safe place. Actually invest in kids and say, you know what, you matter, you are worth it. You're worth the time and energy to make sure you're okay, to optimize who you are, to help you heal and help you move on with your lives. We're going to continue to have that. And I saw it in prison, and I see it every time I go into the juvenile center, and I see it every time I walk through some of these neighborhoods, and I see this just like broken lack of hope in the eyes of these kids who would be fine if they could only have that experience of being loved and having opportunity.